This is Swarfcast. I'm Noah Graff. I am very honored to be with Jeff Rizzie, Director of Digital Enablement at Sandvik Coromant. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Thank you, Noah. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
Yeah, well, thank you. Today, we're going to be talking about Industry 4.0 and collecting machine tool data. It's something we've talked about on the show in the past with a few other companies. Until I was contacted by Sandvik, I had no idea that they were in this business. I always just thought of them as, one of the top cutting tool, more or less razor blade companies. I'm sure they'd hate if I said it like that, but
yes, probably not the best way to describe it, but close. Yeah.
No, it's a very uneducated way of describing it. You just, from my point of view, I just hear about like more specific, specialized cutting tool people, and then, the Sandviks and some of the others. I'm sure the stuff you guys do is very high tech, and I'm just sort of ignorant about it all. But today we're not talking about cutting tools. It was total news to me that Sandvik is in some totally different businesses that I guess in the end, they really make sense because they have all the contacts and knowledge from being in business so long in this world. So first, Jeff, I'm going to want to learn a little bit about you, a little bit about your background. But before we go any further, just give me a brief overview of Coro plus Machining Insights.
Okay. Probably the couple of 15, 30-second spiel is it's basically a cloud-based solution that allows you to extract data from your machines, right, in your machine shop. Mm-hmm. You run analytics against that data, and you can provide really good insight into what's actually happening with your machines. And then you can access that information from literally anywhere in the world. So you have the ability to actually not only see what's going on with your machines at any given time, but you can go back and look at any aspect of how your machine has operated since it's been connected.
Wow.
So from the point of view of the machine, from the point of view of the components you're producing and the cutting tools you're using, you have data about all of those aspects.
Very interesting. All right. Well, one of the first questions that comes to my mind as a reseller of used machines, and we specialize in a lot of older stuff, mechanical stuff, cam stuff. How does it work with that? Can you, say, monitor a multi-spindle screw machine, a cam operated screw machine, or does this have to be a CNC machine that's online, more sophisticated?
Yeah, so it has to have a controller, right? So you need something that has some sort of controller on it. Generally, we're talking about CNC machines, right?
Yeah.
But we're able to monitor, like I said, almost anything with a controller. So with CNC machines, fairly simple, right? We need a controller and you need an Ethernet port.
Okay.
So as long as you have the Ethernet port, you can monitor it. Now, more simple machines, right? Simple controlled machines.
A relay machine.
Right. If it has the ability, right? It may be something as simple as is it turned on or is it turned off? Right. So the more sophisticated the machine, and of course, the newer the equipment, the more data points you have.
Sure.
I think that there's one machine tool company that we were talking to not long ago. I think they said that there's somewhere upwards of 8,000 or 9,000 data points on a modern CNC machine today. I don't know what I would do with 8,000 or 9,000 data points, but there's 30 to 100 that I would love to have access to, and we can access them.
9,000 data points. Okay, so I guess my next question would be, I want to know what are some of these main things you guys are learning about the machines? And then what are some of the biggest issues they're having? So yeah, first, what are you measuring?
Okay, that's a great question. So it could be very basic things like what part is running in the machine, what tool is currently in the machine operating. Is the machine in automatic mode? Is it in MDI mode? Right? Is it executing a program? What is the spindle speed? What is the axis feed rates? Load meters? Do you have machine alarms? Right. So a number of these, the position of your feed rate override switches, right? Feed rate, spindle override, rapid overrides. We can detect all of that right through this monitoring system. So it gives you a really good insight of not only is my machine operating, but how is it operating, right? What are the conditions it is operating under, right? What is the part it's running again, and you know what I mean? And do I have load on an axis? Do I have excess load on an axis? Do I have an alarm state, something like that?
So by gathering all this, you're finding, I mean, the number one thing is the utilization of equipment in each shop, how efficient the shop is. And what are you finding as the pattern? I'm sure it depends, a low volume shop versus, an automotive shop. They're going to need different utilizations to be successful. So what is the high end of utilization of equipment and the low end, and where does it, matter the most?
Yeah. And as you said, you'll hear a lot of it depends, right, in these conversations, because it depends on machines, it depends on production types and things like that. So if you think about in terms of mass production, right, high production automotive, where you're running one component on an automated cell, world class is up in the probably high 80% range, right, of OEE, right, which counts not only, if you think about utilization versus OEE, utilization is only counting when I'm producing. OEE is counting when I'm producing and I'm actually making a good part.
Oh,
right. So you need to bring the quality in, right? Because
right. Well, what's the point if the parts aren't very good?
Exactly. If you can keep your machine running 100%, but make all scrap, that's not good for the business, of course, right? So we usually like to measure in terms of OEE, or overall equipment effectiveness.
What's the highest you've ever seen?
We've seen in the 80% range, right?
80% is the highest you've ever seen?
Yeah, mid 80s, something like that.
Mid 80s.
But again, that's high production automotive in a process that is completely dialed in, right? That they basically have it down. They know what's going on. The scary thing is what we normally hear from customers is they're in that 60 to 75. We hear this all the time.
And they think they're way higher, right?
Well, no, they think that that's where they're at, and when you go in and actually look at it, we often find that they're down 30%, sub 30%.
I'm sure.
It's quite a shock to some customers to actually find out really where their OEE sits.
How often do you guys go into a shop and they're actually close to what they actually thought they were?
Rarely. It's
like 1 in 100.
Yeah, it might be a little bit more than that. It might be 10%, but
okay.
It's pretty dramatic. It's pretty dramatic.
Okay. So what are some of the main reasons why people are not getting the quality and the productivity that, is it poor tooling? Is it, the wrong people on the wrong shifts? Is it various processes? What are some of the patterns you find? So, because I want the listeners want to know.
I won't say that there's always a a trend, right? That every shop's going to have this situation, but there are some that are more common than others. One of the things that we find, and we found it in our own shop, we find that the feed rate, right, the override switches are being used more than they should be, right? And it doesn't mean that the operators are doing the wrong thing. In a lot of cases, they're doing the right thing, right? They're turning the machine down because they might have chatter or something like that, right? So they have a wrong process, and then they're slowing things down. But because we also ask our operators in many cases to run more than one piece of equipment, they might slow it down. They'll go to do something else, and the machine will continue to run, right, slower than it was programmed to run. Right, so we see that actually is a very common occurrence.
So like they're getting an error for one thing and they have to bypass the error by doing some sort of hacky thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's literally they know that they're getting chatter in the cut, right? And they slow it down. Again, they go to do something else and now it runs slow for maybe the rest of the part or for the rest of the shift. It just, things are happening along the way. The other thing that we notice is in machine shops, we tend to ignore the small things, the small stops. We call them the mosquitoes, right? We tend to, we just swat them and we just move on, right? We can get it running again pretty quickly. So it's not really a problem.
Particularly when you have a boss that's like, make me parts.
Just make me parts, right? And it doesn't.
I don't want to hear about it.
Right, exactly. And it doesn't feel like it's a problem, but what happens is these mosquitoes happen multiple times a day, multiple times a shift, and then they start to add up, right?
Yeah.
And we tend to be focused on the big picture things, right? The big issues that take a lot more resources and time to solve. And a lot of times these mosquitoes, they're kind of easy to fix, but we kind of ignore them because we can work around them. But if you just fix them, actually the savings are tremendous. I mean,
so what would be something to fix? Like maybe the machine is dirty,
yeah, so
or the tooling isn't very good, or it needs to be changed, or what give me a few examples.
Yeah, I'll give you some real customer cases. We have one situation at a customer. Actually, this is in our own factory.
This is the factory making cutting tools?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Down in North Carolina. So we have a machine that most of our machines are robot fed, right? So automation, and this particular machine has a camera on it that actually determines whether the part is loaded correctly before it'll allow it to run the cycle. So that particular machine, we run it over the weekend unmanned. And in many cases, we would come in on Monday, or we'd come in overnight the next morning, and it had stopped. It might have run for an hour, it might have run for 2 hours, it might have run for 10 minutes. And the problem that was happening was there was a fault on the camera, but the operator could get it running real quickly, right? It even happened during the regular part of the shift, but they could just go there, fix it, reset it, boom, and it'd be back and running. To them, it wasn't a problem, but when we were able to actually realize how much downtime it was really creating, it was costing us somewhere around $5,000 a week.
All right, that adds up.
In lost production. The only problem of it was it was just needed an update on the firmware. It was free. It didn't cost anything to update it, but we were working around it because we didn't see it as a problem, because we could always get the machine running again.
Right.
So you'll have those types of examples, right? And it happens all the time. We have another customer that they were analyzing their cycle times on this component, and they noticed that.
What kind of machine were they using?
This was I think it was a Mazak machine. I think it was like a Mazak vertical machining center.
Okay.
So sometimes the component, normally the average was about 15-minute cycle time. I'm just using rough numbers. But sometimes the part would take 20 minutes. Sometimes it would take 35 minutes. Sometimes it would be back at 18 minutes. And they couldn't figure out this weird pattern of cycle times. So, again, the machining insight didn't solve the problem, but it pointed out that there's something going on this machine, on this component.
Right.
So what they found out, so they went out there to investigate. What they found out is this program had a program stop in it that didn't do anything. When it got to the program stop, the operator was just instructed to press the button, and it started up again. There was no purpose for this program stop to be in the program. So if they were at the machine when it stopped, they just immediately press it. If they're running another machine, it waited until they got back to press the button. The assumption is that the program stop was put in when they were troubleshooting, right when they were doing the first part, right when they were running off the first part, and nobody ever took it out.
Interesting.
And operators nobody put two and two together that they should have removed it. But when they went and looked at the time they lost, it was thousands of dollars of machine time, because the machine should have just been operating. It should have never been there, but it was there. And they found it right from the patterns of cycle time analysis on this component.
Wow. How often is it human error versus poor equipment? I suppose it really does all come down to human error in the end, right? If equipment isn't treated correctly, I mean, and obviously some machine tools are going to be more reliable than others, some brands, but I'm figuring it, most things, at least out of the box, they probably work pretty well. So is it mostly operator error, as the origin of all these things?
So human error probably does play a lot of it into it, but I wouldn't always say it's operator error.
Mm-hmm.
I think we blame our operators for a lot more downtime than they should be blamed for.
Right. So it's the people on top that
are supporting, right? All of the things that are supporting, right? There's no material, right? I have a cam issue, right? There's a programming issue. I've broken a tool. There's a machine failure, right? Or something like that. We find actually that, which is why we think that most operators, even though they start off thinking about this solution as kind of like Big Brother watching them, they usually start to like the solution because they get to input reasons for down, right?
Yeah. And it's like they solved the problem in a way.
Right. They have a voice now, right? Of why the machine, and so they're not always being blamed for everything. It's kind of an interesting transition.
Or they're being rewarded because look,
yep,
you were able to make it work, even though it's giving us all a hard time.
Correct.
How do people react when you give them this data, and then what happens?
So again, and it depends kind of an answer.
Sure, I'm sure it depends on the culture of the company and
absolutely. Yeah. So some people don't believe it right away.
Yeah.
Literally, they'll look at the data and say, "This can't be right. There's something wrong with the data."
And then do you tell them, "Don't worry, everybody else is disappointed too in what they find"?
Yeah. No, usually what we try to do, I mean, for us, the real key isn't necessarily to just sell them the solution. What we spend a lot of time.
So you guys actually do, we had talked before, some of the other people, there are some other companies that, do some things kind of like this. We interviewed another company a little while ago, and they basically said they tell the customer the data, and then the customers are often really good at using that to come up with their own solutions. They don't want to get into that second business of telling them how to manage their business. That's a whole nother can of worms. You guys go that extra step, correct?
Absolutely. It's we think that that's where our advantage is that, because we're also a manufacturer, right? So we're not only just providing cutting tools, we have our own machine shops. So we understand not only metal cutting, but we understand the manufacturing processes, right? And the value stream of the machine shop. So we can take it from here's the solution that will give you the insight, right? And oh, by the way, this solution was developed by a manufacturing company, right? Not a technology company. We're a manufacturing company that has developed technology.
Sure, which gives you credibility.
Exactly, gives us the credibility. We use it in our own factories. So then we can, like I said, we spend a lot of time on what we call customer success management, and that is, the tool itself won't do anything. All it will do is provide you data. You have to activate this solution into the culture of your organization in order to achieve, right, the real value proposition that this offers. And that's what we spend time with. We spend time with the customer on how do you change your daily work, right, using this tool. And it's not really about, oh, you got to find this screen and you can find this screen and here's how you turn it on. It's, when you start your day, what do? Right? Most, operations managers, they start their day walking the shop floor, right, finding out what's going on.
Sure.
Here's how you should use this tool, right, to do your job today, right? It changes literally how you go about your job. And that's what we spend a lot of time with. And then, when we do locate problems, right, we can identify problems, we can then bring suggestions on how to solve those problems.
Yeah.
We do a couple of things, right? Some of it we'll do as part of our regular job of teaching the solution, but we also have a team of what we call lean specialists that we can bring into the organization and basically run lean projects for them, right? Based on the data coming from these machines.
I see. And so by using lean, it's, it's basically an industry standard. You can always say, hey, this is the way, this is lean.
Right.
But you must get tremendous pushback, at least at first. Look, obviously people have somewhat of an open mind, paid to have their stuff monitored, but still, like, for somebody else to come in, a big corporation like Sandvik, and tell them you need to do this and not the way you're doing it. Do you have to play psychologist sometimes? Do you have to, and everybody's difficult or different. Some people are more difficult than others, but I can just imagine how painful it must be for, I guess you'd call them consultants that would come in. How often, and you probably can't answer this, but how often do you get pushback versus, and if you tell me everybody just lays down and says, we'll do whatever you say, I'll say, I don't believe you. So I don't know. Give me some answer there.
So usually it depends on the role, right, inside the customer, right? So each customer is going to have, right, so they've invited you in to provide this solution, right? So they know they need help. And then they've also potentially invited you in to do some consulting work, right? So you'll get different reactions from different roles inside each organization, right? So a sponsor of that project will almost always embrace you, right? A champion, normally, like when we go to a customer, we're pretty insistent that, if you're going to bring this solution in, you need to have depending on the size of the company, right? You should have an executive sponsor, and you should have a champion, somebody who's responsible to implement this into your way of working.
What's the executive sponsor?
They're usually the ones that can kind of knock down obstacles, right? Roadblocks along the way, right? So they're spreading the message from the top down.
So would that often be the CEO or?
It could be a CEO, it could be operations manager, right? Somebody of at that level. Again, depending on the size of the company. Smaller companies could be the owner. But then we actually find the most important person actually is the champion. Somebody who's assigned to make sure that this tool is being utilized in the right way, that it gets spread throughout all the different parts of the organization.
So wait, what's the difference between the champion and the executor?
So the executive sponsor generally is, right, high level and their responsibility is really to,
budget the money for something.
Yeah, they're budgeting the money, right? So they ultimately they own it, but at the same time they're also pushing, right? They're making sure that all the barriers are reduced, right? All of the obstacles are out of the way, right? So if somebody's resisting, sometimes they might need, right, somebody at a senior level to say, hey, this is important to make sure this works, right? So usually it's that in our own organization, we'll always have right, an executive sponsor, and then we'll have something that we'll call a change manager, right? Who's driving the project or driving implementation of some new process or idea through the organization.
Do you sometimes have people that go, oh, okay, this is great information. Thank you. We'll take it from here.
Yeah, we do.
And is that something that you also are good with, or are you more like, hey, if you're going to do this, you really should do the full service?
Yeah. So it depends on the customer,
sure,
and their culture. So we have one particular customer. Their culture is already there, right? They're driven by lean, and they needed a solution. They caught on very quickly what the solution would do.
Yeah.
And they just went and implemented it, right? They made it happen. They had their own sponsor, they had their own, right, champion. And even though they interact with us, the time we spend with them is much less than the time we spend with other customers. Our normal process is, right, we do the installation, we do configuration, right, we work with them, and we're probably on, virtual calls with them or face to face, once, twice a week, couple times a week. But it's an ongoing process, right? We're checking in once a week. How's it going, right? Anything we need to help you with? We can see this data. Most of our customers allow us access to their data because they know we can see things, right, that and help guide them. But that only comes with them giving us access. Otherwise, we don't have access to their data.
Okay.
But so it does depend on the kind of the attitude and the capabilities of the customer. That
makes sense. Now I know you're not going to give me a definite answer because one can't, but what are the prices of, I assume it really depends on how big the company is, how many issues it has, what types of machines, like what would be like the least bare bones plan, and what would be like the most expensive thing? Can you even give me that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's broken up into two categories, right? So you have some one-time charges, right, just to get set up, almost like if you were getting a new.
Before we go any further, I want to know a little bit technically how it works. This only works by the machines being connected via Ethernet.
Yeah, so you'll have an Ethernet port on any more modern machines. You're going to have an Ethernet port, right? So you can just plug in the Ethernet port. Older machines, if they don't have an Ethernet port, you can add them. Adding a hardware adapter is not really that difficult.
So if it's like a Swiss machine from like 1999, you can still like put an Ethernet cable into that.
Yeah, you should be able to add an adapter to it and still grab data from it. Yeah.
Okay. So it all goes into this hub. Is it in the cloud?
So the way, I guess, architecturally, you've got your machines connected via Ethernet to your network, right, to your company network. And companies will set that up kind of however they want, right, depending on their IT or OT departments. But essentially, you're taking data from the machine. It sends it to, what we call a factory gateway, right? So kind of a data aggregator. So all the data goes up from all the machines to this aggregator. That aggregator takes the data, compresses it, right? It formulates it and puts it in, into the form it needs. It compresses it, encrypts it, and then sends it to the cloud.
Okay.
And then your access to all of the tools, all of the dashboards, all of the reports, all of the ticketing systems comes through the cloud. So
Okay.
you just basically can log in from anywhere you are in the world, just, with a web browser, you just log in and now you have access to your site. So you have access to all the data really from anywhere, almost any device, right? Your phone, a tablet, a PC or whatever it is.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right, you've got this infrastructure put in. Now go back. What are the numbers?
Okay. So installation and adapters are one-time charges. So installation is right around $1,000, right, for just the site setup.
And that could be for a shop with 200 machines versus a shop with 10 machines.
Yeah, so that just sets up the site itself. Essentially, what it's setting up is the cloud site, right?
Okay.
That gives you access, and then you have a per machine installation charge, and it's roughly $60, right? So pretty small as far as the install charge itself. And then you have to deal with the adapters, right? So this is another one of those. It depends, depending on the machine.
Yeah.
You may need an MT Connect adapter or some sort of software adapter.
MT Connect.
And depending on the machine brand itself, like a Akuma as an example, you go directly to Akuma. You can download those adapters through their on control app. Other manufacturers, machine tool manufacturers, you need to get the adapter from us, and then some of them you get from them, and some of them you get from us, right? So an adapter is going to run you, to say, depending anywhere from $500 to $1,000.
All right, so nothing. It's negligible.
It's not a significant cost. Okay, so that's the one time. Just get it set up, and then the service itself. It's a subscription-based service.
Okay.
So you're not buying a piece of software. You're buying, basically, it's a software as a service platform, right? So you buy a subscription, and it's the lowest price is roughly $900 per year per machine, and the highest price is right at a little less than $1,500 per year per machine.
That sounds pretty cheap.
It's pretty, in the big grand scheme of things, it's pretty reasonable.
Do people push you back on that too? They go, "Oh, really? Like $1,500 per machine?"
Yeah, I mean, you'll get some pushback. It's like everything, right? I mean, it's let me put it this way: it's free to ask for a discount.
Got you.
So you can always ask, and how we react to that probably has something to do with how many machines we're talking about connecting and so forth. But
okay, so all this stuff is relatively inexpensive, 1,000 or 1,500 per machine. The setup is very cheap. I mean, if you're, a successful company. So where does it get more expensive?
It doesn't. I mean, quite honestly, this is in my mind, it costs you money not to have it.
Yeah.
Because the ROI on something like this is really, where the real value is in the return on investment. And, if you put it in, so since I've been working in this area, it's been about 3 years. We have yet to see a customer whose ROI was more than 6 months.
Wow.
It's pretty immediate. There's a lot of low hanging fruit.
All right. So what about the consulting part? Is that the part that, I mean, that's got to cost a lot of money. You have a lot of people involved, the high skilled management consultant folks. Is that where there'd be a considerable more cost?
So today, everything we've done up to this point it's part of our package, right?
Really?
So we work with them to provide the package. Now we have launched recently something that we call Core Plus PIP, which is the kind of the full scale lean event, right? That's connected to Machining Insights. So it's a bit of a different package where what we're really selling you is the project itself, not Machining Insights. We use Machining Insights as a tool to deliver that project, right? So, and we will give you guarantees of cost savings as part of the purchase of that consulting service.
Interesting. Isn't it a little
So we're
dangerous?
using it in a couple of different ways.
Isn't it a little dangerous to give guarantees when you don't know how well these people are going to execute all of your
Yeah,
coaching?
yeah, we're pretty sure. So the guarantees are on identified. So before you go into a project, you confirm, right, with the customer on what you're guaranteeing, right? But generally, it's identification of cost savings opportunities. Right? They then have to make a decision on whether they proceed with implementing those cost savings.
Right.
Because sometimes the cost savings might include an additional investment on their part, right? Whether it's in our tools or some, and you need a new fixture, or you need this option for your machine, or you know what I mean? So sometimes it might involve that, but when we do the calculation, we also remove the investment, right, from as part of the cost savings calculation, right? So we're not saying, oh, you're going to get $100,000 worth of cost savings or $500,000, but you're going to have to invest $1 million, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we that's part of the calculation, but it's a pretty structured program. I would say it's not unlike what you see with other major consulting companies. That's how they run their businesses.
Yeah.
Right?
I just expected it to be more expensive because it seems like consulting and coaching is pretty expensive. I mean, maybe it adds up, with all the stuff. Does your cutting tool business, that's got to be helpful to help you find customers?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, we're in most every major machine shop, right, in the country or in the world,
In the
right? I mean,
world, yeah.
so from a branding standpoint, right, we're very recognizable. We're quite trusted in the industry, so people know who we are. They know we're delivering, really powerful, cutting tool solutions. And I would say that certainly the early part of the introduction of this solution, when people found out, oh, I didn't know you, like you just said, I didn't know you guys had that. I'm going to try you guys, right? Because I trust you here, here, and here.
Exactly. You have credibility from one thing.
Correct, correct. So we find that, yeah, we find that quite a bit actually. Is I didn't know you had it. I'm glad you do. Let's go ahead and move forward.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Um, is this Sandvik sees this as a business that's, could be as significant as the cutting tool business going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So not just this particular product itself,
Yeah.
but kind of working across the entire value stream, right? Because our expertise for years, right? Our knowledge base around metal cutting, we're 75, 78 plus years of metal cutting experience is actually quite deep. But we also know that it's not all decisions being made in machining that are affecting how a process or how efficient a process is. Right? You need to move all the way back to design and planning, right? All the logistics. So we now have software that's supporting CAM programmers, for example, logistics, right, specialists. So we can provide software to help a CAM programmer select the right cutting tool, manage their digital twins, right, manage all of their solid models for doing their programming. This is a solution that we call a Core Plus Tool Library. We've got software to support the management of the cutting tools, right? So bending and tool logistics. So how you manage your tool crib and what you're buying, what your inventory is, right? Obviously as a tooling manufacturer, it's a pretty important, it's a kind of a natural step for us to go in and deal with tooling logistics and management of a tool crib and
Right.
how you purchase and what you purchase on what day and
Right. I mean, that's what I've heard before as well, like just setting up your tools, having the right tools. I mean, it's another simple thing that, can be a game changer.
and all of these things connect right across the entire value stream. So
Sure.
it's important.
Absolutely. That's some really important stuff. I think it's consistent with the way the world is going as far as what we're paying for,
Yeah.
Sure, machines keep getting better and better, but in the end, it's, how you use them and how you go about using your business. And today, like, coaching is just the thing, right?
Yes, exactly.
Just a few questions I like to ask some guests. What's something that you recently learned personally, or something you read or saw that kind of struck a chord with you?
That's actually a great question. I'm really intrigued with autonomous vehicles, and not so much the vehicle itself, but the development of where I think we'll be with kind of the autonomous transportation system. And why I think it's intriguing, because it kind of brings back to what I think we're trying to do in machine shops. I think you can draw a comparison to what we're trying to solve, in the same way, because all of that area, it's using the same technology that we'll need to use. So I like it because I like to keep up with it, because I see it as a little bit of a roadmap for where we're headed in manufacturing.